And I was like caught up in the ego of being so young, but being in charge of something so big. And one of the greatest lessons I've ever had in life was when the owner of the company came in. They never came in. And when they came in, they called an all, company meeting, and they sat all 60 people down, and then they put a chair in the front of the room with me in the front in that chair. And they said, today we're creating a safe space for everybody to tell Rudy how they feel about Rudy. And I sat there for around 4 hours and heard people talk about me to me, about my experience or their experience of me in their life and in that business. And it was the most painful 4 hours of my life. I cried the whole way home. I cried that whole night. I did not want to go to work the next day, but it made me one of the greatest leaders because I wasn't showing up as a good leader. Not because I was a bad guy, but because I had all these insecurities that made me say, my business, my decision, my meeting, not our meeting, our business, our goals. And it was those moments that became really, really defining and helped me show up as a very different version of myself. And so, yes, I do take those lessons and apply them when talking to my son who's 8 or my daughter who's 7 or whoever it is as a company. But it speaks into beautifully how every one of these lessons that we have in life serve who we get to become. And that 1 4 hour moment was such a gift, not at the time, but in hindsight, again, because I get to teach that now and I get to recognize when people are in that space.
Yeah, I think about being in that chair, right? And I think about the leader who put you in that chair, and I'm like, I don't know if that was the kindest thing to do, right? Or if that is what I would want or need. But because I've taken stock in my life in the past, I am very conscious as a leader that I have to do this consistently because of the impact that we as humans have on other people connected to us, especially those that we're in close proximity to, like our family, every single day. But I think what can make people an effective leader even more so is doing that head and heart work and evaluation. And then, like this person gave you the opportunity, is to not present your findings, but to receive their findings so that you have a better question to ask yourself in private. And I think when I say that, I mean it in the sense of, we have this level of excellence that we want to achieve. We have this level of excellence or expectation, I believe, in how we should operate as a person. And we have that same expectation over somebody else who's either on our team or we're connected to. And it can often fall underneath that level of expectation. And there's this element of gap. Have you read The Gap versus the Gain? Are you familiar with that? I think it's Benjamin Hardy. And this morning I had this revelation that because so often we exist in the gap, and that gap is the unworthiness. The gap is I'm not good enough. The gap is I'm not rich enough. The gap is you fill in the blank with your, struggle. And I had this revelation that it's less about the gap of us not being able to meet that expectation. And it's more about the fact that our intimacy with God fills the gap. Right. And so the more I come into alignment with who he is, the more I can get ego out of the way, though ego's always present. But I can infuse him and his strength. So he was the best leader ever. If you watch the way Jesus even rebuked, there was elements of rebuke that he had to give the disciples. Sometimes he always did it in love. And that's being an effective leader. And so what question are we asking ourselves that makes us a more effective leader? But simultaneous to that, what are we recognizing as the gap, and how can we lean to God for the full revelation of that excellence that we're looking to achieve without finding guilt or shame in the fact that we can't do it in our own flesh?
I love the way you brought that in, and I'm going to share with you something that I've been doing to great success since COVID started, because companies shifted the way that they worked with people, and they had to get a little more creative. Obviously, for the most part, everybody was locked at home, and so Zoom opened up a whole new world. But what I've started doing is working with companies where you create weekly calls or monthly calls. And for anyone listening, I highly recommend you do this. You don't necessarily have to hire me or someone like me. You could do this in your own business. But we would create with either departments or entire organizations, depending on size. We have these weekly calls where we get them to set a personal and a professional goal. And then at the end of the week, we measure whether they achieved the personal or professional goal. And then if they didn't, we ask them what's in the gap. Now, here's where the beauty comes in, because in the gap is where we bring in, what is your relationship like with yourself? What is
Come
your relationship
on.
like with God? What is your relationship like with whatever and it starts to become this incredibly beautiful place where people start to get seen, they get to feel valued and appreciated, they become connected to purpose within their life and their business. And when a business is actually supporting the individual, not just the businesses start to thrive. And so the more we focus on the people, and that's why I love the word that you just chose to use to introduce the topic, which was the gap, right? Because every time we do one thing, it's how we do everything. We've heard that so many times. And so if you want to be able to achieve something and you don't, let's say it's go to the gym 5 days this week and you don't show up. Well, what is in the gap for you in not going to the gym? Where did you not think that you were worthy or your body was worthy? The vessel that you're carrying, that you've been gifted to show up so that you can be the best version of. And all of this starts to uncover these beliefs we have about ourselves, or the lack of the beliefs we have about ourselves. And that's also showing up in the boardroom. It's showing up at home in your relationships. And so it is a beautiful, beautiful question to always ask, what's in the gap for me? Why didn't I achieve that? If I wanted to do it, I said I'd set the intention for it. I came up with it. Why wasn't I able to? And how is it making me feel? And then here's the really powerful question. When was the last time I felt that way? And then an even better question, when was the first time I felt that way? And you take those 3 points of reference and you can start to build a case of, oh, you know what? I didn't do it because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel worthy because at one point in time I was told I wasn't worthy. And here I've had evidence of when I wasn't worthy. Well, am I worthy? And then we get to bring in the truth, right? We're all an extension of this incredible, beautiful, powerful force that created the world. And by default, for that reason alone, we are worthy of a perfect, beautiful, happy, healthy body, relationship, bank account, or whatever it is that we want to have to be and to achieve.
Oh my goodness. This is all book material. This is way more than a podcast, you guys. This is like such a life lesson right here. And I think because I exist in like the marketplace, if you will, and as do you from a leadership perspective, there's often probably just businesses, right, that are knocking at your door. There's that element, and you've said it twice, and it's plastered on our website. It's plastered in, I believe, the best leadership trainings. It's not just professional development, it's personal development. And if we can come into that alignment factor and realize that our presence actually precedes every situation, like that chair did for you, like that there was a presence of the Rudy that was sitting in that chair, but there was also the presence of the expectation of Rudy and the promise that God had for you of like, you can go higher. And he knew you sitting in that chair was something you needed to diminish ego and sustain his evidence of your worthiness. And so I just hope that people are grasping hold. It's why we do all this stuff for business development. But at the end of the day, my favorite thing that we do is women's retreats, because we're like taking away like just the glitz, the glam, and not to say that there's not fun and pampering on them. There are, but I just think that we're so surrounded by so much exterior validation and consumerism that we're not even capable of understanding like the depth of who we are. I feel like we're just distracted by that depth.
You know, I think the biggest mistake that people make is to believe that something outside of them, and you said this earlier, and I think it serves underlining that people are looking for validation outside of themselves. That validation of, I have to have the good looking husband or the good looking wife, or I have to have the perfect looking family. I've met a number of people in the last 2 years that have wanted to get a divorce. COVID has forced them inward. They question themselves, their lives. And when talking about it, they don't say, oh, I don't want to leave them for this, or I want to leave them for that. They're saying, what are people going to think of me? Their question is, how are people going to judge them? Not about where they're at or what work they could do to create a shift to repair where they're at. And that's a completely different discussion. But we're always looking for outside indicators. And when we turn inward and say, what is it that I can do to set myself up to be the best version of what I can be? And then when I walk into a room as the best version of me, how can I then, impact other people to be the best versions of themselves? I say the greatest leaders are leaders that lead by example.